Thanks for staying with us. We are very fortunate again to have with us in the studio Congressman Patrick Murphy to talk to us about some of the important things that he's been working on. Great to have you here, Congressman. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been busy going back and forth between Washington here and the Treasure Coast. You're still in your first year of office. How's it working out for you?
Well, 6 months in, it's been very exciting. I'm really enjoying it thus far. It is frustrating, though. What you read about in the newspaper, what you see on the news, unfortunately, with the gridlock is true in D.C., and I wish I could say otherwise, but it's very frustrating, for people I meet with and for myself. But, I don't want to leave a sour taste in everyone's mouth, but we are working very hard in the freshman class to get over some of that, some of those artificial barriers that exist. And, one of the first things I did, when I got to office was reach across the aisle and start to make some friends and actually start a caucus called the United Solutions Caucus. Basically, what happens when you get elected, you have these seminars, basically, these orientations, and they put the Republicans over here in this room, they put the Democrats over there, and they say, go figure it out. Well, how in the world are you going to, do anything if you don't even?
The challenge starts in two separate places.
So right off the bat, they separate you. That's not right. So we're actually at one of these orientations, and was introduced to a Republican named Robert Pittenger through a mutual friend of ours outside of politics, and sat down with him, started getting to know each other, and we realized that we were agreeing on like 80% of the issues. And the primary focus was fiscal issues, of course. And so what we did is we decided, let's write a letter to President Obama, to Leader Pelosi, and to Speaker John Boehner. And we got 36 members of the freshman class to sign on to this letter. And it was a pretty even mix of Republicans and Democrats. And it had three main points. Number one, hey, we're going to work together. That idea of my way, the highway doesn't work in your family, it doesn't work in your business, certainly doesn't work in government. Number two, the need for common sense solutions. And that sounds funny to people back home, they're going to say obviously, but when you get to DC, common sense isn't always part of the equation. Part of that was saying we're not going to demagogue. We're not going to spend our whole time in DC blaming President Obama, blaming President Bush or Clinton or Reagan or we are where we are. Let's address the problems where we are and move forward from here. And then number three was the desire to go big. That we didn't work our tails off, for election just to get reelected. We're doing this to make a difference, and we're going to have to go big. And a big part of that is our fiscal house and putting everything on the table. And that includes tax reform. That includes, strengthening Social Security and Medicare to ensure it's there for generations. That includes going after Medicaid fraud, waste, fraud, abuse, and duplication. If you do all those, then you have the economic growth piece of the puzzle. And that is the best way to reduce our long-term debt.
Well, it sounds like what you're saying so far, people would appreciate just to acknowledge that there is a problem as a big step in the right direction. And we haven't heard a lot of that before. Yeah, there's a problem between parties, people not communicating, and somebody's got to be looking to connect with the other side and kind of drop some of those barriers a little bit. So that's refreshing to hear. And I think especially here on the local level, politics in Washington is fascinating, but for most people, they want something more practical to happen. They don't want the bickering on the two sides. They want to hear what people are doing to make the situation better. First, the economy. That's an important one. So that takes quite a bit of time. You also work on some environmental issues. There's a lot of talk lately about the Indian River Lagoon and the Lake Okeechobee draining out. Any progress, anything happening that is good for our environment?
Yeah, well, this is a big issue of mine, and again, this isn't a partisan issue. Some of the issues that come to D.C. and come across my desk somehow become partisan in D.C., and they shouldn't be. These need to be fact-based solutions, and Indian River Lagoon, the Everglades as a whole, the global Everglades, is really something that we have to focus on because it's a big part of our economy. For every dollar spent locally in our environment, it comes back 4 to 1 for our economy. So this is smart spending, and this is an area we have to do better at. And T.C. Palm over the weekend, there was an article Mr. Whitaker wrote, and it was a letter he wrote, and you get through the letter, and then he tells you, by the way, I wrote that 40 years ago. And a lot of the same things that he said in there are still true today, and that's completely unacceptable. Part of what I'm trying to do is get all the players in the same room together. Get the agricultural interests, get the South Florida Water Management District, get the Army Corps, get the state, get the federal level, and get some of the local, community leaders involved, because we all, sort of have a different say and can all, sort of pull different levels to help out. And vilifying one of the groups, I don't think helps. There's a lot of blame to go around with this with the circumstance that we're in right now. So try and get everyone in the same room and see what we can do going forward. one of the solutions here locally that I'm really focused on is continued federal funding for the C-44, for the new reservoir that is under construction right now to hold some of this water coming out of Lake Okeechobee when they have the discharges, treat it, and then put it back into the river. We're looking at some alternative mechanisms for that can help filter this water cleaner and quicker. This is about an 8-year project, hundreds of millions of dollars. We're looking at some short-term opportunities as well. That won't solve the problem entirely, but will be a step in the right direction. On top of that, we're looking at some other things such as water farming. This is something that the environmental community has signed up on, and agriculture, South Florida Water Management District, and the Corps. So now it's about funding. And this is just another piece of the puzzle to prevent water from getting to the lake. If we can prevent that, we can slow down the discharges that have to come out. On top of all that, we're continuing to fund the strengthening of the dike around the lake. This dike has been put in the bottom 10% of all dikes in the country. Very dangerous. It's way past its intended lifespan, so we have to continue investing in strengthening the dike itself and the culverts in it. On top of that, we're looking at some things outside of our district, but really affect us. As the Kissimmee is being rerouted, as we're preventing a lot of the water flowing in there, that helps us. As we lift the Tamiami Trail to the south, we can begin getting that natural flow of water south, the way it originally happened, and preventing it from coming out the Caloosahatchee on the west and the St. Lucie on the east. So all these things combined take, of course, money and take cooperation. And that's what we're trying to do, is get everyone on the same page and understand that it's the global Everglades, that something might not be happening in our backyard, but it could actually really help prevent the problems we're dealing with.
And just these areas that you're mentioning, everything from Tamiami Trail all the way up to rivers to the northwest, all of that is not in your district, so it shows why you really do need to work with others. You need to work with your fellow representatives.
Yes.
If you're going to do things that are good not only for this Treasure Coast area, for the country, for the state in general, you've got to be able to work it out, because there are so many people affected by those massive changes from the north end to the south.
Exactly.
And that's a lot to be accomplished. It took so many years to get into a bad spot. Environmentally, it's going to take a while to improve it, especially with the growth of this area. You have to be thinking about way ahead, down the road, generations to come.
Exactly.
Your district is growing. This part of South Florida has a lot of room to grow yet.
Yes.
From the city's end, we are working on a plan in the future to build a reservoir that may help with some of this problem. It's way down the road, but we have to be thinking along those lines too.
You're exactly right, and water, most scientists and even economists are predicting will be really the fight to come. That fossil fuels is sort of the past. It's really going to be a fight for water going forward, and with sea levels rising, our aquifers are being polluted with salt water. As more and more people are pulling from the aquifers, this is going to become more and more of a problem. And luckily, we're more advanced and developed and have more infrastructure than most countries, but it's still going to affect us, and we have to be prepared, as you said, and look forward, 20, 30 years down the road. And if we can start preparing for it now, it won't be that painful down the road.
Great. We'll switch over to healthcare now, another important topic on everybody's mind. There's been a lot of talk about Obamacare being implemented slower, some of the parts being held up. How does that look from your end? Where do you think we're going with that?
Well, we've always said the Affordable Care Act was not perfect. No piece of legislation that big is perfect. We need to focus on fixing it. And we've introduced several bills that would make some, pretty sizable changes to it, and we actually supported the delay in the rule that would force companies that have 50 or more employees to have health insurance for their employees. There's a 1-year delay, and this was done because there were a lot of complaints and fears that businesses just weren't ready for it. So I support that legislation. We have to make sure this is right. One bill that we co-sponsored was a bill that would relieve the tax on health insurance plans. So Medicare Advantage in particular, there's a lot of residents in this district that have Medicare Advantage. This relieves the tax from them, so their premiums, their prices aren't going to go up because of the Affordable Care Act. We have one of the larger senior populations in the country right here in this district. Got to make sure that this Affordable Care Act is helping them. And what it does, it closes the donut hole for seniors. It allows young adults to stay in their parents' plan until they're 26 years old. It's basically, when you look at our budget as a whole and you go line by line and really start to look at it, I guess being a CPA, I took some time to do this. The single biggest problem really looking forward with our country, and what got us in this mess is healthcare costs. And just to put it in perspective, if we could keep our healthcare costs to rising what they have the last 2 years, which is up 3.8, 3.9% nationwide, our long-term debt of $17 trillion is basically wiped out. That $17 trillion number is based on healthcare rising at 12 to 15% or so. So we've got to keep it in check. We've got to put a lid on these healthcare costs rising, and this is, one of the efforts to do it. We've got to go and continue to see what we can do. One of the things we're really pushing is moving toward the pay-for-performance methodology for doctors. So they're not incentivized to do unnecessary services. So they look at an individual holistically and look at the lifespan of them, and that means early treatment. That means preventative treatment. So that's what we're trying to do, is move to that pay-for-performance methodology, which will really help keep a lid on these costs.
And that's important because sometimes people feel, I think, that if the insurance company is paying for it, then there's no reason to limit that incentive to do more, to pay more for the price to go up. And the inflation in the medical world is so much higher than everything else.
Right.
And at least if there was some parity there, it would make a lot more sense.
Exactly.
And that's an important topic because there are so many aging people in our community here.
Yes.
Some of the other things, the economy, this, of course, the healthcare is a big part of it, and some of these other issues, but we are seeing some turnaround now, and that's a good sign. It's a little bit encouraging.
Yes, nationally, of course, we're seeing the stock market is hitting record highs. We've had 40-some odd months of economic growth. This is despite the sequester. We're still seeing economic growth, and all forecasts have us continuing to grow. So at the national level, things are really coming back. And there's pockets of growth throughout the country. Miami right now is on fire. Real estate's really coming back, and we're seeing that move north. Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, Palm Beach itself, Martin County, and St. Lucie are really starting to pick up. I was with Mayor Fiala last week, and we were talking about the permits at a 7-year high locally for permits being issued. I think there were 1,100 permits issued last month. So things are really coming back locally. And I think what we're sensing is we're not seeing it completely in the numbers, but the optimism. People are talking. The engine's starting to move. The engines are turning a little bit. So you're getting that feel back. I'm very optimistic. Unfortunately, it's not coming back as quick as anybody would have liked, and certainly doing the best I can at the federal level to create a sense of certainty. I think that's one of the single biggest thing that's held back growth in our country is this unpredictable environment we live in now. Whether that's through regulation, whether that's because of our tax code, or just this sense of, well, we're going to go off the fiscal cliff. Is it going to be a sequester? Are we going to let the debt ceiling rise or not? There's a lot that the federal government is doing to hinder growth. I blame our own government for this lackluster recovery. We've got to do a better job of getting along. If you can agree on 80% of how to get there, do it. Make the deal, move on to the next issue. We've got to get some results out of D.C. so locally, the small and local businesses and mom and pops can really start growing.
That's so important and so refreshing to hear it from somebody representing our area that's now up in Washington, because it needs to be recognized.
Yes.
And I think most people would agree with that. A couple of the other things that are happening locally, another good sign is the retailers have noticed Port St. Lucie. We've had 4 major national retailers look at us recently and decide to invest here in our community, and we see that as a great sign that they know that the future is coming back. It may never be roaring the way it was 6, 7, 8 years ago, but maybe slower and steadier is a little bit more effective that way.
Well, I think you're exactly right. Slow and steady. That's the way to go. And I was talking to the mayor as well about Bass Pro Shops coming in. She's very proud of that. I think the area should be proud of that. That's good for consumers. That's good for everybody locally. I think it's good for real estate values. And that's another thing that I'm really focused on in D.C. is a sustainable growth rate for real estate. That's a big part of our economy. And most middle-class families, their largest asset is their house. And it's important that housing prices are stable and slowly ticking up. And if consumers have a little bit of faith that their house is stabilized and not going to dip or even go up a little bit, that little bit of money they've saved, they're going to invest in a new TV or maybe buy a new car or go to the Bass Pro and purchase a new fishing rod or whatever it may be. And so much of our economy is based on consumption. So a lot of it's about confidence. A lot of it's about your biggest asset, your house, being stable. So what we're trying to do is ensure that Fannie and Freddie are right-sized. Right now they've become too big. We've got to bring them back down, but we must ensure that they're there to ensure that people have access to a 30-year fixed rate, that they can, live the American dream, buy their first house, and that's a lot of what we're trying to do through Dodd-Frank, some of the regulations, and through some of the GSE reform we're looking at in my financial services committee I sit on.
And with your financial background, it sounds like you're very aware that there really is not a free lunch in the economic terms. You don't just take off like that without consequences.
Exactly.
Unrealistic growth, it could be harmful, and we've learned that here in the last several years. The whole country has, but we're doing much better now. We're about out of time, but if you could just give us an idea of what you think is important coming up for us next, any new projects you're working on, new legislation that you're about to support, anything else coming up?
Definitely. Locally, we're going to continue to look at the river, going to continue to look at the Everglades as a whole and what we can do. Going to continue trying to get funding here locally for beach renourishment, inlet dredging, which are some areas we've already been successful with, continuing to work with the Army Corps there and try to improve that relationship. Also going to be looking sort of at the national level at immigration reform. There was a bill that passed the Senate, hoping this gets to the House floor and we can get a real bipartisan bill to vote on here. This isn't just because of the 11 to 12 million undocumented workers. This is a jobs bill, and this is a bill that could help reduce our long-term debt. The CBO independent agency came out and said if we pass immigration, it could reduce our long-term debt by hundreds of billions of dollars. So got to get immigration done, got to get health care right. The Affordable Care Act is not perfect. Let's improve it. Let's get that right, and let's create some stability. Let's pull back on some of the regulations. It's not more or less, it's smarter regulations, and let's get some tax reform. So those are some of the national issues I think will really help locally here if constituents see that stability.
Well, great. I know you've got a lot to do, a lot of work to get to take care of some of these things. But we really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us, to talk to the people of Port St. Lucie.
Thank you.
About
it's great to be here.
It's good to have you here and hear directly from you, so we don't get the filtered version through the news media or through some other source. We can hear directly what you have to say and how you represent our community. We really appreciate taking time.
Thank you.
Congressman Patrick Murphy, great to have you here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. And we'll be back after this quick message. Stay with us.